Hi guys, welcome to another Living SA TV video. David here. So today we guys are gonna meet a friend of mine and we're gonna do an amazing tour today about some statues around the CBD and so on. You guys really need to meet him and come with him on this amazing tour, but I want to show you guys what you guys will be able to see. Again, stay tuned because once again this video will blow your minds. Okay guys, so with us we have the amazing brother. Tell us.
Wow, man, what a great day. It's going to be, my name is Mohau, Wanagalo Tours, based in Johannesburg. Yeah, I'm a curator of memories, dealing with mine workers related heritage. So right here in front of us, we have a very important statue. It's the first of the many that I'm going to show you today. So the reason I'm doing this, guys, is because Johannesburg is known as the city of gold. Very important. And who built and who created this wealth is the workers. So I focus mainly on the worker heritage, people who built the gold in South Africa. So yeah, I would be taking you around the statues in and around Johannesburg. These are very important heritage products. And right in front of me, we're at the Wits campus in Johannesburg. It's the unknown miner. Interesting fact, this is a statue that was it's basically a prototype from the original from Kimberley. Kimberley is the town of diamond. That's where diamonds are first discovered in Johannesburg. And because of the vandalism and the state of those statues, this was donated by one of the sons of the sculptor, Oswald. Hermanwald, that's it. So as you can see, when you look at a miner, this was a tool. This was a tool for extracting gold. So the muscles represent a lot of things. This is a man who toiled in order to dig out the gold. These are the people who created the wealth. And you must remember, there's a lot of repercussions that happened when gold was discovered in South Africa. The first thing is, well, in Johannesburg in particular, and in that industrial scale, because you must remember, Johannesburg was not the first place to have gold discovered. There were other places before Johannesburg. The unique thing about Johannesburg is that it was at an industrial scale. And that's when now it propelled Johannesburg and South Africa from an agrarian society into being an industrial society. And back then, the challenge was that the gold that we had in South Africa was so thin and it needed a lot of labor in order to extract it and make profit. And what do you do as a capitalist who needs to make profit? You have to organize and recruit labor. And you have to come up with ways and tricks and all manners of ways to get people to come and work for you. So the first thing that they did, they came up with laws that would enforce young black men to leave their homesteads and come to Johannesburg. And one of those laws was the hut and the poll tax. So what that meant was that they imposed tax for every hut, and therefore it required you to then leave and work for money, because you must remember, people were self-sustainable, so they didn't have that form of exchange in terms of transactions. It was all a bartering system before that. So now they were then forced to then go and work for money. So that was the first biggest impact that the discovery of gold had on black people in South Africa, was that it dispossessed them. It made them leave their homesteads and families to come and work in the gold mines of Johannesburg. So yeah, we're back we're still in Braamfontein. It's the second statue. So in terms of location, we are right in front of the municipal offices. This is the footer. This is where the Johannesburg City Council sits and makes decision about our city. It's on Reesek Street, right at the top of Reesek Street from town. You'll find this beautiful statue. It's the Miners Monument. This was erected in 1985. So basically, this statue is pointing towards where the first discovery of gold was hit in Johannesburg. It's facing towards Langlaagte. That's where the George Harrison Park is.
That's in Joburg South, right?
Yeah, yeah, just on the southeast of Johannesburg. So yeah, they are facing right directly to where gold was first discovered in an industrial proportions. That's the George Harrison Park. Yeah, and it's three men showing how they work the land, and this is the introduction of machinery in the mines, because with mining, the ore in Johannesburg was very difficult because it's quite thin, right? So you needed expertise. So that's when you started having an introduction of international migrants, migrant workers from all over the world. This is now the melting pot of Johannesburg. You had people from Germany, from Ireland, from Australia, from all over the world who wanted to make it rich, strike it rich. You had pioneers now were like, here's an opportunity. It was a gold rush. And there is this misconception that, Johannesburg is just a migrant labor for black people. No, there was that's when you started having communities of Germans, of Portuguese, and you still find it in the makeup of Johannesburg. You know, there's places that are predominantly where the Portuguese settled themselves and so forth. And yeah, they're hitting the rock, as you can see. The interesting thing about, when people started congregating in Johannesburg, it was not a well-planned city. It was a shanty town. If you look at your Californian gold rush stories, the cowboy life, it was mainly men who wanted to strike it rich. So it was not organized.
It was a cowboy town, basically.
It was a cowboy town, basically. And now you had people who were known as the landlords. The landlords were the capitalists who had money from the Kimberley diamond mines. And when they heard about this, they started investing and putting structures into place. What do you need? You need a former mine. You need workers. So where do these workers live? So you started building hostels, what is known as compounds. What I'd like to call labor concentration camps, because
that's what it was.
Yeah. So you had all men living in one building, and all they do is work. So the conditions are not quite ideal. You can imagine those chaos. So
diseases will spread very quickly because there was no hygiene, no sewers.
Exactly.
So it's basically meant for its own.
Yeah.
It must have been crazy, eh?
Yeah. So you can imagine. So now they started putting up systems whereby they will have a mine manager, compound manager, and stuff like that. And this is the concept of divide and rule. So from the Zulu tribe, they know that Zulus are very they like, they're warriors. They love being in control. They love anything that's got to do with fighting. So most of them were put up as indunas. So they were the ones who would look after all the other men. And within that, you also had entrepreneurs. So because the form of payment was so low, you needed to find ways to make extra cash.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the whole concept of there's these pants, they're colored pants, they've got patches. So they used to wear pants, but now when they get torn, they would take the work overalls and cut them, and that's how they used to patch them. And then it became placelo, these pants that are now known to be Zulu traditional attire, but that's the background about them. They emanated from the mines.
Fascinating.
Yeah, they emanated from the mines. And you'd find in these hostels, they were built, their bunks were made out of concrete,
mm-hmm.
and it was a 2x2 room, and you had close to 28 men in that room. So they would cook there, because back then they never used to have systems whereby they would have a kitchen. So they had to cook for themselves. And they started introducing, because on weekends, they would need, it was their rest, and something they did in the winelands as well, but not to a certain extent, to a big extent, whereby they would introduce traditional beer as a form of reward. So on weekends, they would have this barrel whereby the men would, pour umqombo. It's called umqombo. It's traditional beer, and they could sit and, at least have their recreational time. And I think I'll touch on this when we go to the next statue, because this is the introduction of another form of art expression, which is called gumboot stance. So I think we'll touch on it when we see the other statue.
Okay, perfect. Let's go. Okay, brother. So this is the third statue. Tell us about it.
Yeah, great. We are in the city center now, right in the middle of Johannesburg, and where we are, it's close to the High Court. This is called the legal precinct. You find a lot of legal offices, attorneys, because it's close to the High Court. As you can see, the MPA is here. But yeah, what brings us here is the statue. This is our third statue. It's a place of interest for me because this is where it was called the government square. This is where they proclaimed the building or the planning of Johannesburg.
Are you serious?
Yeah, this guy from Brandis, he was the magistrate back then, and as soon as all the surveyors, all the town planning was put in place, it was proclaimed in the spot to say, this is where we are going to build the city of Johannesburg.
Sure. Everything spawned from here, basically.
Yeah.
Well.
The formal establishment of the city of Johannesburg.
And who was this Von Brandis gentleman?
Von Brandis was a magistrate at that time. You must also remember Johannesburg is younger than Pretoria. So there were already formalized towns around Johannesburg. But they had to bring in someone from Pretoria, because now you needed to establish a town. And this guy was the magistrate in Johannesburg at that time. So he then proclaimed this is going to be Johannesburg, the plans. There was going to be the north. They were called the ranchies. The North Ranchi, like a rand, ridges. Yeah, rand means ridges.
Okay.
So the south, the east, the west. So yeah. So what's interesting now, you start to see a so-called shanty town, cowboy town, now being formalized, right?
Become a real thing.
Becoming a real thing. You're going to start having the name of streets. You're going to have banking structures. You're going to start having post offices. You're starting to have establishments that are going to make a working town. Now you start seeing the entrepreneurship. People now not only coming to Johannesburg to find gold, they're coming now to create services. So there's a guy who, because now you have a lot of people, there was no water. Johannesburg is one of the biggest cities in the world that is not close to a source of water, a river. So the closest we have here is the Vaal River. Yeah, the Vaal River.
Which is like an hour from here.
It's like an hour from here. And so you had a guy, just give me a second, I'm going to think about this guy's name. Panato, I think Panato.
Bernie Bernato.
Hey?
Bernie Bernato.
Barney Panato. He was the first guy to bring in water from the Vaal
Sure.
to here.
So he built all the
The
pipelines.
structures and
Wow.
stuff like that. The whole system of bringing water into Johannesburg.
Wow.
So you start having those kind of enterprising people, electricity. The first power station in Johannesburg was based in Germiston.
Sure.
Yeah. So industries are starting to be developed. Power supply, trams. The first form of transportation that's modern in Johannesburg were trams. you know, the ones you find in most European countries.
Yeah.
But before that, obviously, at horse and cart carriages, bringing things in and out. And so how do you then develop it further? You need railway stations, railway lines.
That's where also roads came in also, I think.
Yeah, railway lines. So the interesting thing about railway lines is that they were not only meant to bring in goods in and out, they were also meant to bring in labor from other
Provinces.
countries.
Oh, also,
Now you
yeah.
look at your Mozambique, Zimbabwe, because you must remember there was not enough labor in the country, so you had to bring in from the neighboring
That's
countries.
crazy, eh? Wow.
Yeah, the neighboring countries. So you have a diverse population of men from different kinds of the world, different parts of the world, English, German, Irish, French. Now you have even the indigenous mixture of men. So what does it do in a working environment? You need a working language. So now you have to establish one language that you're going to communicate with to make things easier.
English.
Yeah. No, this was Fanagalo.
Oh, okay.
So Fanagalo, it started from in the cane fields in the KZN.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is a mixture of your Zulu. I'd like to call it an infantilized language.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's a language of working. It's a language of instruction. It's
Like
not
a slang for everyone to understand
Yes,
themselves. Yes. Wow.
It's a pidgin of some sort. So it's not you don't find emotions at that language. There's no I love you. It's
Direct.
direct. So Fanagalo, it always says you. Wena loyenza. You must do.
Buena Loenza.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So even Fanagalo itself literally means Fanagalo, like this. Fana, like this. Galo.
Fanagala.
Yeah.
Ay, Fanaka
Fanakalo.
Lo.
Fanagalo.
Okay, Fanagalo.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So that was the language of the mines.
Wow.
So every person in the mines had to learn Fanagalo. So at a later stage, the mines started establishing mining schools within the mines. And part of the curriculum, you had to learn Fanagalo.
Fanagalo. Wow.
Yeah. So if you speak to anyone who used to work in the mines in the 60s, 50s, they still know Fanagalo.
So is it still a normal language talk for people still working in the mines or?
Yeah, I think I mean to a certain extent the older generation still speak it, but now you have an emergence of young people, especially the ones who are working more in the offices and more expertise. I don't think they learn Fanagalo anymore.
Yeah.
So your advantage would be if you can speak more than one South African language, that'd be an advantage because now you're able to communicate with various
Wow.
language barriers. But back then, to bring everyone together, you had to learn Fanagalo.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
The story for the third one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to mention that this is a very important statue here in CBD, and it looks very bad taken care of. The JDA did an amazing job by putting this up, but we are not taking care of this place properly and this is next to the High Court, so we got a lot of garbage, we got a lot of pee. This place looks stenches, and there is nothing being done. So who is taking care of this CID, this stuff needs to be fixed. I don't want to see this like this, and this looks a bad image for our city, so I don't want to see this like this. So please, you guys can see that I'm not people accusing me of of not showing this stuff. There you go, you guys are seeing. Please clean this stuff. This is not admissible.
Yeah. So this is one of the few statues, I think the only one that was erected after 1994 by the ANC government. It was basically a partnership between the mine workers. It was a partnership between the National Union of Mine Workers and the Chamber of Mines, of which this is their building next to us. It's the only statue that was erected commemorating the contribution of workers in Johannesburg. Yeah, this, guys, you can see it's a man drilling into the ore. similar to the unknown structure. It doesn't have anything on top. It's got his headgear. That's called the makarapa, the headgear, to protect them for underground. And he's got his boots, protective gear. So when gold was discovered, they didn't have protective gear. So I think the protective gear was something that was introduced in the 50s.
So, but this is very significant because remember how many people had to die in order for these things to be applied, you know?
So now the health and safety protocols and measures, when they started being introduced, you know, that's when the workers were provided with safety gear. And so in the mines, when you're underground, because it was so dark, they didn't have the electricity underground back then. So the only way to, you know, grab attention to your fellow workers was to tap your boots.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
So the number of times you tap it, or the kind of rhythm it makes, it meant something.
So it was like established like a code, like almost like a Morse code to define danger or do that, bro.
Something. It would mean probably, you know, bring me a shovel, or, you know, it was kind of like some way of communication.
But when you mean it, they were literally in the dark.
They were literally in the dark.
Wow.
There were only candles back then, right?
And I can imagine the oxygen in the tunnels was so minimum that the candles will burn that oxygen. So many people probably even died without that oxygen, especially at how many meters down? Wow.
So you must also
claustrophobic,
remember, and because of the challenges I've mentioned earlier about the poor ore in our rock, you had to dig deeper. That's why we have the deepest mines in the world.
In the world, yeah.
Most mines in the world, they are kind of like shallow, and, you know, go like what, 100 meters deepest, but ours go deep and deep and deep because our ore goes deep.
Yeah.
That's why we had to keep on going down. Ventilation systems had to be developed. So a lot of technologies came in South Africa through mining, because you needed expertise. So there were new discoveries that were unique because of our situation that were discovered. So there's a lot of artistic products that came out through.
It was a technological boom in a way.
Yeah. But also like cultural and entertainment artistic products, like your gumboots, for instance. I was mentioning now with the code and trying to talk underground in the dark. So what came out of that was the dance called gumboot dance. It's one of our greatest exports in terms of creative products. It's the tapping of the boots and making some form of rhythm. There were famous groups that came up because of this. And another interesting aspect about gumboot dance is that because the mines realized the value that it had, they started establishing troupes within the mines.
Wow.
So various mines would start having competitions.
Okay.
Yeah, between themselves, and start doing, gumboot dance competitions.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and so if there were like international dignitaries or important people visiting a mine, so the mine owners would use that as some form of entertainment. Like you something you see when international visitors come, they do the traditional dances.
Yes.
The gumboot dance became a welcoming entertainment for visitors, for dignitaries, and so forth. But the funny thing is because they started now incorporating language and singing, so it was also a way for the mine workers to mock the mine owners.
Wow.
Wow. So literally means the mine owners are full of shit.
Wow.
But they didn't know the lyrics.
Wow.
So they became a form of protest and a form of
passing the message of what was happening in the mines, like a protest in a form of artistically speaking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic.
You know,
And what does that mean? Wow.
White man's balls. They're red. Literally, that's what they would say.
Yeah.
So they were basically using this platform to mock the actual mine owners.
Wow.
Yeah.
And again, I love the part of these statues, like the hidden meaning behind them, you know, because in many things in history, instances, is we always make sure that we speak about the history of the victories, but what about the victims, you know?
Yeah.
Like speaking about, for example, something that people understand, a serial killer story.
Yes.
Why do we need to focus on a serial killer?
Yes.
What about the victims, the
Yes.
people that were, you know, people don't think about this, but it was a lot of slavery, you know,
Yeah.
slavery trading, to bringing people to work in the mines, pay lower wages, it's a sad part of this, but unfortunately the world runs like that, even today.
Yeah.
We don't have to hide that.
The famous poet Brecht,
Yeah,
his famous poem, History from Below,
yes,
whereby he says, "Who built the pyramid? Who built the empires of your greatest Alexander the First? Who were the cooks? So as much as these men were great, there were people behind them, because they had to eat. The army had to eat. Who was prepared? Who was making those armors that they used to wear? So basically, that's the approach of History from Below. It's telling the history of the people behind
Yes.
the so-called.
and this is basically the goal of this video is,
Yeah.
because most of these statues and heritage are forgotten, you know. You said it yourself.
Yeah.
Many of these things are being forgotten
Yeah.
in our city, and it's not okay, because it makes part of the heritage of Johannesburg itself. The voice of the voiceless, let's put it this way,
Yes.
that are not talked about.
I mean, in Johannesburg, most of the streets and some of the significant places were named after the pioneers, the people who came and discovered and had an impact in terms of the progression of the industrialization. Your George Harrison, this street before it was named Pixley Kaseme, it was named Harrison Street. You have Von Brandis, where we just came, the statue of Von Brandis. It was named the street is named after Von Brandis. There's Risik. These were all prominent
Figures
people,
of the
figures,
time.
Yeah.
But like I say, they are just like the fronts. What about all the history that came below? You know what I mean?
Yes.
And people, especially nowadays, people don't research it, don't make their own research.
Yeah.
They just take things in face value.
Definitely.
What about the hidden history? You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. Great. We're still in the city center, on Main Street. This is known as the Main Street Open Museum. This is where there was a lot of stakeholder cooperation between business and government and so forth to create this precinct. So what we have here, these are called the jumping antelopes. This structure here used to be in another part of the city.
I think it was in, if I'm not incorrect,
Yeah.
and excuse me guys if I commit a mistake, but I thought it was at Nodia Square, I think.
Yeah,
I think back in the day, like 50 years ago.
Yeah, just behind the post office.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was a gift by the Oppenheimers. The Oppenheimers are known as the biggest, they are the people who own bigger stakes in the mining industry in South Africa. Basically, they are the mining magnates in the country. So
The generational wealth family.
yes. So yeah, this was their creation, for lack of a better word, but this is what they a gift to the city. They gave to the city.
And let's be honest, their philanthropy has helped a lot of the CBD, especially we are here at the Anglo-American head office. Now they changed to Rosebank.
Yeah.
But these banks, I always look at this bank and reminds me of the Federal Reserve in Washington, DC.
Yes. I mean, for me, this is kind of like a medieval type of architecture. It reminds me of Munich in Germany, actually.
Oh, okay.
It has that kind of like feel to it. And this back in the days used to be the richest square mile in Africa, because this is where all the mining companies were situated. All the mining companies had their headquarters here. Anything that had to do with mining, they had their head offices on this strip of road,
Well,
Main Street. Also, the Chamber of Mines is just close to the other statue that we were. If you understand the history, is that in order to influence governments or society, you need to come together as any form of structure, whether you are in the arts or whether you're into finance or anything. You need a structure that is going to speak in one voice. So this is what they did. They formed the Chamber of Mines. The Chamber of Mines became the speaking voice for all the interests of mine workers. So in anything that they needed to have done or influence the government at the time, that was their speaking platform. And it was so powerful that it also had an influence in terms of how then the trajectory of the country had to be structured.
Basically, they did what the J.D. Rockefeller did in John D. Rockefeller did in the United States, and Carnegie and so on, basically.
So you must remember, you had a government, an Afrikaans government that was in Pretoria. Its main interest was taking and looking after the farmers, the boere. Because you must remember, it was an agrarian economy. So now you have the mining companies who are bringing the capital and the industrial expertise and so forth of growing. And they also became a tax, what you call, that's where the government could collect tax. So
With the revenue.
The revenue, yes, the revenue. So they were a very important aspect in terms of how the government in Pretoria was also raising money. So they had to listen to them. They had to listen to them. So the whole system of labor reserves, like your townships, they were the people who influenced that, because it started small in the hostels, compounds. So as the city grows, what do? You say, okay, we need black clerks, we need some form of middle class that is going to
So let's develop an educational system in order to create more workers in order to supply our industries.
Yes. So then that's now the establishment of Soweto becomes.
Wow.
But the Soweto is not in the city. It had to be outside of the city, keeping in line with the segregationalist aspect of South Africa. So you would say that social engineering in South Africa was also influenced mainly by the discovery of mine. They actually concretized it.
Explain to the viewers what was that the permits that you had in order to come to the city. How does that work?
So what the first thing the mines did, because they needed labor, so they started establishing labor units. So in each part of the country whereby they wanted to draw labor, they established, it was called the Employment Bureau of Africa, the biggest employment agency in the world.
Wow.
Its influences even went as far as China. They had an office in China. Because you must remember, there was a time in Johannesburg whereby there were Chinese mine workers.
Were also brought in.
So it was the biggest labor agency in the world, DEBA, the Employment Bureau of Africa. So they started having these offices around the country to recruit, and when they recruit, it was only for the mines.
Wow.
So as the city develops, the government copies this system and starts having a pass office. Literally, because now the city is not only reliant on mining, there are other industries, and you still need workers. They established the pass office, which is on 80 Albert Street. It was basically an internal home affairs office whereby the movement of black people was controlled. So for every black person who was working outside the mines and wanted to work in Johannesburg had to pass through the doors of that office.
That's crazy. Just to think about that you need to be classified by the color of your skin, for me, it's an aberration, you know. I think there should be created a better, system than that, That's, But I can imagine also what you're saying, because they needed an endless supply of workers, because I can imagine the mortality rate inside of the mines. And keeping in mind that nowadays the mining industry in South Africa employs like 500,000 people. So that just shows how big the mining industry really is, even in nowadays.
I mean, even some of the medical advancements, some of them were actually discovered here in this country because there were so many complications that were not experienced in other countries,
Yeah.
and also how to address them. So people started coming with innovative ways to address certain health, medical issues, and so forth. So you had the best doctors, you had the best medical facilities in the mines to address. And one of the biggest sicknesses or challenges in terms of health-wise was the silicosis, which is it affects your lungs because when you're underground, you breathe the small particles,
dust and all
the
that.
dust.
And
So,
any other heavy, let's say, heavy metals.
Yeah.
Think about Johannesburg is probably one of the most radioactive cities in the world.
Yeah.
Look at all the dust dumps in Soweto.
Yeah.
That thing when the wind comes,
Yeah.
blows all that. Now imagine all of us breathing that,
Yeah. It
because
goes up.
the thing is people don't take really concern to it
Yeah.
because that only affects them later in life.
Yeah.
And it's like I say, it's a long-term killer.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. So.
So that was so for me. This where we are now. These structures represent what was once the most powerful, most richest square mile in Africa.
We also can't forget also the fact that the first the JSE started here, and the life and blood of CBD was the Johannesburg exactly the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, you know,
Yeah.
and when it moved to Sandton, that was the main thing that killed the CBD back in 2000 when they move away.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the potential of heritage that we have here, this should be more amplified, more, you know, we need to show this more to people. And that's what I'm saying. Your work here also as a guide tour makes a lot of, because all your insights are very important in order to understand the deepness of the CBD.
And just to add, this used to be the headquarters of the Anglo-American. So they have moved now kind of to Rosebank, and so these buildings now, some of them are being donated to various stakeholders. I know there's going to be an educational institution, also Wits University as well will have a stake somewhere here, but those are just ongoing developments. So it's quite exciting to see what then becomes of this space once you have new tenants, and then we'll bring in some different energies and so forth. So yeah.
And reinvent the place, basically.
Yeah.
That's what we need, because there is so many things happening in CBD, but we only look at the negative in the middle of this. Just remind me, what is that building there? Is that a court?
That's a court.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know. You can put it for another sec. Hey, David. Since we're close by, I thought, why not? There's also the statue. Although it doesn't fit into our theme of mine working statues, but I thought, since we're close by, why not? It's the famous Mandela statue. As many might know, he was a boxer, very fond of boxing. It was one of his favorite sports. And right here, we're in front of the High Court, Johannesburg Central Magistrates Court. And the interesting thing, why the statue is here is because right across the road, you'll see Chancellor House.
So was this the place where Mandela used to be a lawyer by trade, if I think? And this is where he had the first office. You guys can see like a type of timeline there. And who was the person that he was working? I think it was Tambo.
Tambo. So Chancellor House was known as the offices for famous partnership in terms of lawyers. It was Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela and Oliver Reginald Tambo. Both of them are prominent people in the ANC, and they were both presidents at some stage of the ANC. So this was their offices, and they were representing, I mean, their cases varied from domestic, civil, and they would do also a lot of pro bono work dealing with forced removals or unfair treatment of black people. So they balanced their work between pro bono and also just sustaining and keeping their law firm
So
floating.
they basically were the go-to guys in
Yeah.
order to combat the system.
Yeah.
They became like the war heroes in a way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you must also remember the history of the ANC. You had a lot of the ANC was an organization that brought in a lot of people from various backgrounds. It brought in a lot of people who came from royalty, were well educated. So you had this wealth of knowledge, and which is what made the ANC to be a powerful organization that it became to be, because you have people who came with expertise. People who were in the leadership structures of the ANC were educated. They were teachers, professors, and so forth. So those expertise is what made the ANC and the foundation of the ANC to be strong. Yeah, yeah.
Fascinating. Let's just go there just to show
Yeah.
a little bit of the timeline. You guys can see there is also a few tourists coming here on this side. So this is basically the timeline,
Yeah.
which is interesting, is because it's really open air museum.
Yeah.
Next to the statue, there is also a representation of that was Nelson Mandela doing shadow boxing.
Yes, yes.
So he was probably extremely fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Fascinating. Look at this. This is beautiful, eh? Right here in CB. And another point that I want to mention with you, brother, is the fact that all these places are actually, safe to visit.
Yeah, yeah. This
There's
is open to the public. I mean, all the places we went to are open to the public, and they're accessible, especially this part of Johannesburg where we are, starting from May Street all the way down. It's a really interesting place if you want to spend half a day of your weekend and around Johannesburg. It's an interesting walking tour you can do around here.
It's all interconnected.
It's all interconnected. Especially on weekends, it's very quiet.
Because majority of the working population works in the
not around.
township.
Yes, yes, yes.
So that's what I meant with the shadow boxing. You guys can pause the video to read. Keep the mind and the body healthy.
David, this is another one of interesting sites that I like bringing people and sharing the story of this building. It's on the eastern side of Johannesburg, but still in the central district. Just 2 blocks away from Main Street, where the ABSA building is, and we are in 80 Albert Street. It's a very, very popular, famous address in the 50s, 60s. Every black person who came to the city of Johannesburg had to pass through these doors. This was the internal home affairs of regulating movements for every black person who worked in the city. So in order for you to be working in Johannesburg, you had to get your permit from this building. It was called the pass office.
Wow.
This is the state that it's in now. And, for me, I always refer to it as the real apartheid museum of South Africa.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So
Why?
This is where apartheid was solidified. Dividing people. This is where you stay. This is where you could work. This is where you get the permit in order for you to allow you to work at a certain time from 9 to 5. You're allowed to be in Johannesburg, but after that you had to be out. And all that was regulated from this building.
And let me guess, this building is now what, Ajak?
So this building is still owned by the city, JPC, Johannesburg Property Company. It has it was closed in 1986, so it has went through various
Reinventions.
Yeah, it was at some point it became a home shelter for women and children, run by an NGO. And in the current state that it's in now, it's basically hijacked. I mean, it's homeless people live here. It's not properly managed and so forth. So I think the city really doesn't know what to do with this building, and I'm really disappointed that they don't realize the significance and the importance of its history, particularly to black people. I'm really disappointed because of that. I'd like to take you closer and so that you can see the placard the blue placard. So you have the Johannesburg Heritage organization that assigns heritage buildings in and around and sites in and around Johannesburg.
The blue plaque.
So they put the plaques there, the plaques to.
I can
to
show
tell
you
the
guys
story.
there, just a second. That's where the blue plaque is.
As you can see, it looks like a very rundown area, unsafe. But we are safe to run around because I'm around. I wouldn't encourage you to come here on your own without a local. But let's go close.
Okay. We follow your lead, brother.
Follow me.
Bunani.
So yeah, there it is. That's the plug.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And just so you guys can read it proper.
Yeah, I'll read it to you. So, pass office in number 80 Albert Street. The central pass office was an infamous checkpoint of the influx control system under apartheid.
Sure.
Influx control system
That's-
under apartheid.
Wow.
The DOM pass, which controlled the movement of African people, was issued here. Denied a place in the city, many were ordered to leave Johannesburg. This building, opened in 1954, as the Non-European Affairs Department, was greatly enlarged in the 1960s. Converted into a women's hostel in 1994, it was renamed the Usindi, so Women's Shelter.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, that's
yeah.
wow.
Unfortunately, we can't go inside. It would be great to kind of like get a sense of the ghostliness of it inside, but yeah, it's currently being inhabited by homeless people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, David, this is the last statue I'd like to show you. Another interesting heritage product that we have here in Johannesburg. It's right by the entrance from the airport into the town of Johannesburg. It's a statue of a man with a pickaxe holding up the rock that he has just discovered, and that rock is what's gonna bring him riches. That's him striking gold. So there's been a lot of debates as to who this man is. So some believe it might have been George Harrison, who's credited as the man who was the first man who struck gold in Johannesburg, George Harrison. So yeah, but there's been debates about that. It's the oldest statue out of all the statues that we've visited. This was the first one to be erected. It's just unfortunate I can't remember the date. And it would have been nice if there was information.
It's not your fault that the information is
yeah,
not there. So
yeah.
the plaque, I don't know, was the plaque stolen? Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can see that there's a lot of stuff here regarding the World Cup. So tell us about it.
Yeah. So during 2010, what the municipality decided, because this was kind of like a gateway. You're coming from the OR Tambo International, getting into the city. So they decided to kind of like, revamp this place, incorporate some, soccer-related elements. So as you can see those pillars there, each pillar had a flag of all the countries that were coming to play, take part in the World Cup. There's balls, soccer balls there.
Let's go there.
And then just behind the tree.
So this was literally revamped and forgot.
Yes.
And it's like in the main road. This will take you to anywhere in Gauteng, This is not a good reflection because I'm not even sure if the red bus passes here or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the other unfortunate thing is that there is no parking to this side. So
It's like we need to park inside of Eastgate.
Yeah, Eastgate. Yeah.
So look at that. The plaques were literally removed from the two sides of the statue.
Yeah.
So that's not acceptable, eh?
Yeah. As you can see, the famous vuvuzelas that became the symbol of our
World Cup.
Yeah.
Sure, look at that. So all sure, scary, eh?
Yeah.
Would you like to add anything else besides that from this place?
Yeah. In closing, maybe I'd like to add You know, as someone who does tours in and around Johannesburg and curating these spaces, it's always a challenge, you know, to explore these places because there seems to be no interest or no investment, you know, by the city. And I believe that these are some of the heritage products that could be, you know, invested in order to draw more interest into the city. We are not called the city of gold for nothing. You know, we should actually be exploiting and using that phrase because we were a city built on gold.
Thank you.
And therefore, how do we then preserve and how do we then show off that history? These are the sites that I think should have been invested in and prioritized and used to sell Johannesburg as the city of gold. Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Thanks, David. I like the work that you do, showing off interesting parts of our city. My name is Mohau. My company is called Fanagalo Tours. I'm based in Johannesburg. If you want to get hold of me to explore our beautiful city, my number is 083-541-7092. Sooner or later, I should also be available on your YouTube channels. Watch the space. There's something growing coming your way. But yeah, thank you, guys.
So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, which was really cool. I learned a lot today. I'm going to do more videos with Mohal in the future. There's a lot of stuff we have to do, but again, we can only do this ourselves because nobody else is going to do it for us. So stay tuned for the future videos with Mohal in the channel. Again, my name is David. This is Living SA TV. Share, subscribe, destroy that like button, and I will see you in the next Living SA TV video.